All right, so back here on the 1978 Toyota pickup. So I got the trans mount totally in there all the way. So bolted down with the bushings and finish welded all the stuff. I got the little plate that I made for the end caps all welded in. Now that I had everything set up, I also finish welded around the motor mounts. So those are all finished around. I haven't boxed in those yet or added any sort of gusseting or anything, but those are all welded around. Same thing on the other side. So sort of the reason why I wanted to do all that stuff is I needed to get an idea of the clearance that I needed once the engine's totally assembled. And so you see all the lines that are around it, and yeah, that's a big old hole. This is gonna be a giant mess. So a couple of things. So what I had done was I sort of pre-assembled the manifold, turbo, and the tubing. And so what I needed to do is I needed to get a couple of measurements. So I needed to get the measurement from where the manifold hooks into the block to the highest distance away from where the turbos go. And it actually goes a bit further than this because there's some heat shield and some other stuff. So I needed to get that distance so I knew how far away from the block the turbos and everything stick out. And then I also needed to get the distance from the top of the manifold to the highest part in order to make sure that I had clearance on the top. So that was on the exhaust side. The intake side, basically the same thing. So I needed to get some measurements as far as there's a mounting hole on the inside here where a stud comes out of the block. And so I can use that for reference. So I needed to know the distance from the inside area of the intake all the way to the front edge in order to know how far away it was. And then same point up to the top of the intake manifold. And so if we look at those, I made a couple of notes. So I have this line here, so 9 inches from the block. It's actually like a bit under 8, but obviously I don't want to have 0 inches of clearance, so I'm going to give myself a full inch of clearance in order to make sure that, you know, if any little random hose or something that I didn't account for, that I'll have clearance for that. So I'm going to cut all the way out here, and then, you know, the manifold kind of comes out and up. There's actually nothing really in this area. But, you know, instead of having some crappy curve, like I have all these weird ass curves, and those will be a bear to try to fill in, I just drew a straight line. And then with that straight line, I'll be able to like get a piece of metal that fits in that area a lot easier than trying to follow a bunch of weird ass curves. So I had all those kind of temporary cuts in place before I knew where things were going to end up. And so now that I, have the engine in the spot that it needs to be, and I have an idea of the clearance that I'm needing, this is the line that I need on this side. And then from the manifold up, so I measured up to here, and it's 9 inches that I need. And this sort of sucks. Like I was hoping to not have to get in to this piece here. So behind this is where the wiper assemblies are and some other pieces, and I didn't want to get into this at all. But I'm going to have to, unfortunately. So I'm going to have to cut into this and kind of see what sort of mess I'm making for myself. You see these holes here. This is where like the wiper motor hooks in on this side, and then on the other side, this is where like if you got to do some maintenance and whatever in order to get access to the wiper assembly, you got a hole on that side. So behind here is where the wipers run, and I'm not going to have to get into it a lot, but you can see there's a whole bunch of different pieces of metal here. So there's this piece of metal here that goes on the inside where the wiper assembly is. I got this vertical piece. They're all laminated together here. And so with those bends and that lamination, this adds a ton of structure. So this piece that bends up and comes outward and then this piece that bends down and comes outward. There's a bunch of structure that I'm going to cut out, like right in the middle. This whole section here provides a lot of structure to the cab. So when I cut all that out, you know, I'll definitely have to engineer something that adds some structure back to make sure that I get some angles and bead roll and other stuff in order to, you know, make sure that this thing's just not a noodly mess. It is, you know, it's a body on frame construction, and so, you know, I'm not going to be cutting into mounts or anything like that, but still, like right down the middle like that is kind of a bummer thing to have to cut out. So I got to cut all that out. Same thing here on the intake side. So this is the stud that I was talking about on the intake side that I'm using as a reference point. And so this one, I didn't even bother putting a reference line because, you know, this hook is actually higher than where the intake manifold comes. And so, you know, this side doesn't need any room at all. It's the turbo side that needs a whole crap load of room, which is a bummer. And so, like, I don't really need to clearance this side vertically at all. But you can see that from this stud here, this is my line from the stud, and I got to get all the way over here. So this is actually where the brake master would mount, and I'm getting real close, right? So like this, you know, you need to have a bit of sheet metal here for those bolts to hook into in order for this to be stiff. Like, you know, you push on the pedal and you don't want that sheet metal moving around. And so I'm getting real close to here. So I might have to, you know, when this gets in here, I might have to build a plate or something that strengthens that area so it's not all wobbly and horrible. This is pretty lame that it goes right through the middle of the steering shaft. So I did temporarily mount in the steering wheel and the steering shaft in order to get an idea of the mess that I got here. Fortunately, so what happens is the intake manifold comes out and arcs up and around, and so it won't actually come into the steering shaft. It sort of comes out and up, and so it'll be above it. But you can see the final cylinder is way back here. I'm going to have to lose this section of this, you know, plate that mounts to the firewall. I'm going to have to lose that for sure. So I'm going to have to cut, you know, clearance this out in order to make enough room. And then, you know, this whole section, I'm going to have to cut that out. And so, you know, that's definitely way more of a mess than I thought it was going to be, which sucks, but here we are. The other thing I did, now I took the steering box out. I did double check where the steering box mounts here on the bottom, and that's going to be way worse than I thought it was going to be. So what ends up happening is the steering shaft comes up about here, and it is heading directly to the bottom of this motor mount is where it's headed. And so I'm definitely going to have to do like a double U-joint setup, and I'm going to have to get it moving like way back here. Like I'm going to have to find some way in order to get this angle headed, you know, downhill early to be able to get around the motor mount. And then instead of the steering shaft going, you know, flat, it's going to have to, you know, come out and then, you know, up right here. So this is going to be some kind of crazy contraption in order to get the steering set up. That's such a mess that I'm going to completely ignore it for now. I know that it's going to suck, but I'm not going to obsess over that right now. I got so many other messes to fix that I'm just going to do the stuff that I know that I can do, and that is cut out that big old hole that I got, see what sort of metal is behind it, what things look like, all kinds of other crap, and, you know, getting to fill that in. What I'll end up doing is after I cut it out, I will fully assemble the engine. So I will get every little pieces part that I have, every bit of it. I'll take the entire exhaust, turbo manifold, all of that stuff. I'll take all these lines and parts and everything, and I will get that fully assembled before I try to fill anything in, just to make sure that I don't miss anything, have clearance issues or whatever else. So the other thing that I'm looking at here is if I ever want to do any kind of maintenance on this thing, this looks like it's going to be a cab off operation to do anything. You know, just looking through this, like engine out to do stuff, I don't think that's happening. I think, you know, with that cross member, the way that I got it back there, you know, replacing a clutch or something should not be too bad. I should be able to replace a clutch, no problem. But as far as like any other thing, like I think a lot of crap on this car is going to be cab off. And so as I'm going through it, I'm going to try to be making sure to be bolting as little things to the cab as possible to make it to where if I need to ever do cab off again, it's going to be easy. And I don't have a whole lot of stuff that's going between the frame or the engine or whatever and bolted into the cab, like all kinds of like, you know, accessories and other stuff that you might be bolting to the cab. I'm going to be trying to keep that at a minimum. And so, yep, trying to get this engine in here is definitely turning into a faff. Give me a whole new respect for all those custom car dudes that are out there, because this is some shit. So, all right, cool. Catch you on the next one. Thanks.